So, we are on to Call of Duty Black Ops 4 when it comes to my retrospective reviews of every single Call of Duty game from Call of Duty 4 Modern Warfare all the way to the current Call of Duty, which is of course Modern Warfare 2019. And this has been a really fun series. I've been doing it for a year now, so these videos I've been doing for a shitload of time, and the reason why is because they're not really easy to do. I have to go back and replay the entirety of the game from all the zombie maps, or Spec Ops or Extinction stuff, play a lot of the multiplayer, and I'm saying like at least a good 10 to 15 hours of multiplayer, play through the campaign if the game has that. It just takes a while to do these videos, and then after that I have to, of course, piece together my thoughts on it, and then obviously put together the video. It doesn't take a short period of time. I also just don't like rushing them in general. I do like to take my sweet time with them, so I'm not throwing these videos in your guys' faces. But this is obviously the second to last we're going to have to do. Then obviously we'll be doing Modern Warfare 2019, and then by the time I finish both of these, I'm pretty sure the next Call of Duty game will be out by then, and we'll be able to review that once that's all said and done. But I do like to wait for all the DLC to come out and for the final bits of updates for said game to come out before I do these reviews, just because I don't feel like it's not fair to judge it before they're done with everything. And it does seem like Black Ops 4 is going to be done with everything. They've already been done with everything for a bit of time now, so let's get into it. Obviously, there's 3 modes in this game. They dropped the campaign and went with Blackout instead, which was the first time any Call of Duty game has ever had a Battle Royale mode, and of course, which continued on into Modern Warfare with Warzone. Now, what's really interesting about here is because usually campaigns, I count them as a little bit less of a percentage when I'm ranking these games, because I feel like campaign isn't as important as the other modes. Some of you might disagree, but that's just how I see things. But with this, I feel like all 3 modes are very equal. They seem like they were equally taken care of by the studios. Not everyone agrees with me on that, but I really do think they were. The ones that were marketed the most were obviously the Battle Royale one, which that's the one they cared about the most. They wanted to get the most attention, but I do feel like they still took care of all 3 of the modes. And so I decided, why not just make it equal throughout all of them? Obviously, to make it get to 100%, one of them has to get 1 extra point. And I decided to give it to multiplayer because I do feel like multiplayer is the most important portion of any Call of Duty game from Call of Duty 4 to now. Even though I love zombies a lot, I do think that multiplayer is more important when deciding whether or not these games are good or bad. I do think that's where the majority of people play the games and where the most attention goes to when it comes to any Call of Duty game for that matter. Battle Royale and Warzone is kind of a little bit different, I feel like, even though I do think that the multiplayer in that game is still getting a lot of attention, even if that attention to me is not really good attention, because we'll get into Modern Warfare in a separate video, of course. But I'm going to give Blackout 33, right? Zombies 33 and multiplayer 34, which if you add them all up, they get to 100% in total, and we're going to give each of them a ranking out of those specific points. And I think it'll be a lot of fun. I do think this is going to be one of the longer videos in the retrospective review series because I do consider this game to be insanely underrated. I actually like it a lot more than most people. It's even in my top 5 favorite Call of Duty games. So kind of similar to the Infinite Warfare video, where I do think that game gets way too much hate and it's not nearly as bad as what people say. I think Black Ops 4 is a very similar game to that. I really do enjoy this game, even though I do understand and know a lot of the issues with it, and there's a lot of issues. I mean, that's the thing about this game. There's a lot of issues, probably more than most CODs out there, but there's also a lot of great stuff, and I think that's why it kind of equals itself out to the point where it's actually not that bad at all if you look at all the good stuff. The bad stuff, if you're only looking at that, obviously it's going to bring it down a lot, but you have to look at everything. When you look at the good stuff, honestly, it brings up the game a lot more. And we're going to talk about that here, of course, in this video. So let's get into it, starting off with the Battle Royale Blackout mode, which is an exciting thing. By the way, we're not going to talk about Specialist HQ. I don't even consider that a part of the game. It's literally a stupid little side mode that you do these little training missions and you get these cool cutscenes that are kind of interesting if you really care about the Specialist stories, but personally, I don't give a flying fook. So let's just get into Blackout. Blackout was a huge change for Call of Duty, not doing a campaign and doing a Battle Royale mode instead. A lot of people were worried, but also really excited because they saw the success of Fortnite and thought that COD would be following in those footsteps. And honestly, in many different ways, this game did. And I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing, because a lot of things of that what Fortnite did was really, really great. It just didn't work as well for a non-free-to-play game. I think that's the worst part about Blackout, is the fact that they never made it free to play. Warzone obviously succeeded way more than Blackout did because it was free to play. I still think Blackout should have been free to play at some point in the life cycle. Unfortunately, they only did for like a month. They had some like free to play access thing, but that was it. I do think Blackout as a whole was a great change of pace for COD because it was getting kind of formulaic. We get a campaign, multiplayer, and zombies pretty much every year. You know, obviously some games don't do the whole zombies mode, but obviously the reason for this Battle Royale wasn't the reason that they all said. They said it was because they wanted to try this new mode out. They didn't want to tell a narrative this year within the campaign mode because they had narratives thrown in all the modes pretty much. I mean, there was a narrative in Blackout. There was a great story in Zombies. We'll get into that later. But it wasn't your traditional style campaign, which the reason why obviously is because there was a lot of behind the scenes development issues which kind of forced them to release this mode instead. And then they released the Specialist HQ mode, which, like I said, had some pretty cool cutscenes, but overall wasn't really a fun or replayable mode at all, really. This was the first mode in Call of Duty that had over 40 plus players, which is insane. I mean, 100 is a crazy amount. You see Warzone with 150, which is even more, but we haven't seen this type of scale in COD before. Before it was Ground War was the biggest thing, which was a 9v9 mode. Like, we haven't seen anything beyond that, and to get that this year was just insane. And it honestly worked pretty well. Blackout had some optimization issues at launch. They fixed them relatively quickly, and the game kind of played pretty smoothly there on out. One of my favorite things about Blackout would have to be the classic locations in the map. Majority of the map is new. There's a lot of new locations from things we've never seen before, but there's also a lot of these epic locations from previous games like Raid, Nuketown, Firing Range, Verrucht, Diner, Turbine, Buried, all these great zombies maps and multiplayer maps, even some campaign locations, like for example, the Hind from Black Ops 2. Remember that little like mission when you steal a Hind with woods? They have that little location in the map. It's just really cool to see all these different places. I personally really enjoy that. The updates throughout the season were pretty great. The early updates, they started to kind of weaken as the game went on. My favorite, of course, is the Grand Heist update, which was huge for this mode. They added Standoff from multiplayer as well as Buried to the map, which was awesome. And then they added the Hot Pursuit game mode, which had a bunch of cool cars and such that really kind of made the game feel a little bit more alive. They definitely didn't take themselves seriously, and I kind of enjoyed that. You know, Warzone definitely takes itself more seriously for the most part. I was okay with having a mode where it was kind of just for fun, you know. There was zombies in it, there was all these ridiculous skins and camos and ridiculous weapons in it. I liked that. I really felt like it was a fun take on Battle Royale, and it wasn't the same goofiness as Fortnite. It was its own type of goofiness. I really liked that. The character skins were dope, emotes were funny. But when it comes to the microtransactions, we'll talk about that in the multiplayer portion. I'm just going to slightly talk about it now and how it affects Blackout. It was pretty great at launch how you can earn a lot of the different characters within Blackout just through doing challenges. But over time, they kind of stopped doing that and they started putting the characters exclusively in the shop. Like I said, we'll get into microtransactions in the multiplayer section. I don't want to talk about that too much now. But definitely the post-launch updates for Blackout kind of fell over time, and I think a big part of that is obviously because Treyarch was pushed onto their next game way earlier than expected. We know what's happening with COD 2020. They weren't supposed to work on that game that early, so it definitely took them off of their post-launch content updates for Blackout because they were expecting Black Ops 4 to be a long-term game, which obviously didn't really work out because of this whole situation they had with having to work on COD 2020 so damn early. Definitely the biggest issues I think I have with Blackout is, well, first of all, the graphics. I didn't hate the graphics. I had nothing really against them, but just compared to the CODs around them, like World War II, Modern Warfare, Black Ops 3 even, the graphics didn't really hold up. I don't mind the graphics in Zombies in multiplayer, but Blackout, definitely you can see how downgraded it is because they're trying to fit this big map in it. It's not terrible. Graphics don't really affect the game that much, in my opinion. I'm more about the gameplay. But the graphics are definitely something that takes away from the experience just a little bit. The lack of a way to respawn in the main modes is kind of unfortunate. Thankfully, they added tons of modes that allow respawning. To me, I think having a respawn feature in all battle royales is like a necessity now, because it's really not enjoyable joining into a battle royale, dying in the first 2 seconds, and then just you don't want to play again, because especially the long wait times in between, it's not fun in my eyes to do that. So I think stuff like the Gulag or the reboot card in Fortnite is a good system that this game unfortunately didn't have. But like I said, there was other modes like Hot Pursuit, Heavy Metal Heroes, all which had sort of respawn ways, therefore kind of making the modes a little bit more enjoyable. Looting was a bit much in this game. For me, I didn't really mind it, but I could see from the casual perspective, it does get a little confusing. I think Warzone's looting is way more simplified. The looting in this game does take a while, and it does kind of get a little messy every now and then. But I do think that for me personally, I have no problem with it at all. I actually think I really like the different options you have with the different equipment and the different attachments you can put on all the different guns. I like that a lot. But let's get into the best part about Blackout. My God, I think Blackout would be like 5 points lower if it wasn't for this one thing added for free for all players in April of 2019, and that was Alcatraz. Holy shit, man. Alcatraz was the coolest thing added to Blackout. One of the coolest things added to Black Ops 4 in general. I was not expecting a brand new map, because Fortnite never added a new map. They just made map updates. I was just expecting more map updates. And then we see that we get a whole damn new map. Now, it's obviously not the same size as Blackout. It's a much smaller scale map, but it's also got only 40 players, which honestly makes for a really fun time. Alcatraz is one of those modes that if I want to play Blackout, I'm going to play Alcatraz. I don't barely play the main modes anymore because of how fun Alcatraz is. The way it plays is your team gets about 4 or so lives, and if your whole team dies at once, you're done, but you get to keep spawning in, and obviously it's the same as any other battle royale where the map gets smaller and smaller and smaller, and you're fighting in Alcatraz, one of the coolest locations from Zombies, and you get the whole island, not just Mob of the Dead. You get the whole entire Alcatraz island. It's awesome. It's awesome. You get some zombies in the middle of the map that you can fight against and such, and you can get like the Plundergat in the box. You can get the Reagan Mark II variants from Alpha Omega. Like, I think it's the greatest thing they did, and I still think if this game mode was free to play and had maybe better graphics, it would have succeeded just as much as Warzone did. And I say graphics because graphics are huge for people who are thinking about getting a game and don't know yet, because graphics is the first thing they see. They don't get to see the gameplay until they play the game itself. Therefore, graphics are really important in that aspect for making games more playable. Obviously, from my perspective, like I said, I don't really care too much for graphics. They don't affect the gameplay to a large extent, but it's definitely something that if this game had, it looked a little bit nicer and it was free, it would have been huge. It would have been huge, I have to say. Blackout, to me, like I said, I didn't want to see a battle royale every single year, but after seeing how Warzone did it, I definitely think that we could see new updates to Warzone every year in accordance to the brand new games, and it would work because it's free to play, and hopefully it wouldn't take too much out of the main game itself. One of the biggest complaints with Blackout was that it might take away from the other modes because, you know, they're only focusing on what they think is going to make them the most money. But I honestly thought that Zombies and Multiplayer got a decent amount of updates to the point where I wasn't really mad. You know what I mean? I wasn't mad. I think some of the updates over time, like adding Hijacked, adding Buried, was awesome. I just think they could have utilized this map a little bit more, done more with it. Maybe had some in-game events. They didn't really do much with that. They changed the map a couple times, had it like look a little different. They had like a flood happen, but you didn't like, it wasn't an event that did it. I think it was just a lack of budget, the lack of resources, lack of time that this game had to kind of set them back a little bit with doing these really cool things in Blackout, which I do wish they did. Blackout, though, still fantastic mode. I'm going to give it a 25 out of 33. Of course, like I said, it's at 33 points. 25, that makes it a 76% mode out of 100. That's pretty good. I would like Warzone a lot more, I do, but I think Blackout was a great start to the Call of Duty Battle Royale scene. I know there's a lot of people who just hate Battle Royales for some reason because Fortnite made it a little bit cringy, but the mode itself is definitely really replayable. You really want to get that win. You want to hop in there. You want that dub, and you're not going to get it every single game like you would. Multiplayer, you're going to win like half your games. You don't really get that feeling you do when you win a multiplayer game compared to winning a Blackout game. You feel so good after winning these games, man. I do think the mode could have utilized a lot more, though. Like I said, there could have been more with the contract system. I wish the microtransactions weren't as egregious, but we'll get into that with multiplayer because there's a lot I have to say in this multiplayer section of the video. So now we're on to the multiplayer mode, and I got a lot to say about Call of Duty Black Ops 4's multiplayer. So I have a weird sort of relationship with this game. I wasn't a massive fan of the multiplayer during the life cycle. I definitely played it, but I was definitely more into Zombies as well as Blackout. But recently, like within the past like couple months, I have fallen in love with this multiplayer, like completely, man. I've been playing it a lot, way more than Modern Warfare's multiplayer, almost daily at this point. It's just very, like, it has a casual side to it, but also a very competitive side to it, and I feel like I could play either or, and I think that has to do with the lack of a massive skill-based matchmaking system. Doesn't really feel like there's much skill-based matchmaking in this game. I don't believe there is that much, which kind of makes it more playable in my opinion. There's some games where I'm playing tryhard, some games where I'm playing shitty players, so I get the best of both worlds. You get those competitive matches as well as those casual ones where you can just pub stomp and get a bunch of score streaks and just dominate the lobby. Now, one thing I do really like about this game is, of course, that competitive side to it. Ask any competitive player. Most of them agree that this is one of the best CODs for competitive, especially with the bigger leagues. They loved this game because of the health, the time to kill, how the maps worked, and how they flowed. It felt good for competitive. It made battles intense. Gunfights are intense. The game modes are intense. Team Deathmatch isn't really that good in this game, honestly. You want to play the modes like Domination and Hardpoint, and they added a bunch of other really cool modes like Control and Heist that are really competitive. And Stockpile, which was also in Black Ops 3, one of the coolest game modes in any Call of Duty game ever, I have to say. It's really, really fun. The maps in this game, all of them are fine. There's no really standout maps that are like the best that we've ever seen before, other than, of course, the remakes, because they have about 9 remakes in this game. They brought back some of the best maps in COD history, like Firing Range, Summit, Slums, Nuketown, Grind, like all these great maps from previous games they brought back in this game, and I was happy with that. People didn't like that, but there wasn't that many. They still had tons of new maps. But with the new maps, none of them were really like top tier maps, but none of them were garbage either. They all just kind of worked because they all had a very similar design to them. They were all that 3-lane design, but they still had very unique settings and some unique elements to them that made them really enjoyable. None of them really play bad. They all flow well. It's just they're not that different from one another, which is something people had a problem with. I'd prefer that than Modern Warfare, where they're all different, but most of them suck. You know what I mean? Rather than play it safe and be very similar to one another, but play good, because they all play really damn good, other than maybe Arsenal Sandstorm, but that's not bad because of the design. That's bad because of the weather changes they decided to make. But that's another thing I really did like about this game, was the weather variants of the different maps. They had about like 10 or so weather variants where they took a map, changed around the weather, and turned it into a brand new map. Now, people didn't like this because they were like, oh, I want new maps, not this trash. It didn't take away from anything. It's not like they costed money. They were free. They just gave some new variety to the maps, you know? We could play different versions of different maps with rain, or this map is going to be snowing now, or this map's going to have a storm now, like Contraband, which is a very sunny map. There's a variant where there's a hurricane going on during it. That's awesome. I really would like them to do more of that in the future with Call of Duty. I've really appreciated that in this game, and I think they should have done more with them, honestly. If it didn't take away from the development time, of course, but I don't really think it did that much. It didn't seem like it took time away. The higher time to kill and the manual healing was a nice change for me. Now, I know people don't like it that much. I think slower time to kill is always going to be better than a faster time to kill. I think this might have been a little bit too slow, but definitely I would prefer this over the really fast like Call of Duty Ghost time to kill, because it allows gunfights to last longer, and it also it kind of rewards the player for having better accuracy, and you're not going to get shot in the back as much, so spawns don't really matter as much. If you get a bad spawn, it doesn't really matter. You're not going to get shot in the back, because if you're good enough, you'll be able to turn around and win that gunfight. The long time to kill was great, right? And then the manual healing, although I don't want that in every Call of Duty, it was a nice change of pace. It changed up how you got into gunfights. You can get back into gunfights quicker, and you can actually just save yourself in the middle of it. It kind of made you like think instead of just playing the game mindlessly. You know, I guess people who don't really want to think while they're playing video games don't really like the system, but personally, it's not that big of a deal. It became muscle memory at a certain point. It's just if you're injured, you click LB and you're gonna, heal yourself. It's as simple as that, and I didn't really think it was an issue at all. Operator mods were a great system where you can get these really unique attachments. It took up 2 places in the pick 10 slot, which is another thing. Of course, pick 10's back, thank God. Divisions in World War II was terrible. Thankfully, they brought back the pick 10 system, which was pretty fantastic. The score streaks in this game were also really powerful. They were maybe a little bit too easy to earn. I think they should have been maybe a little bit harder to earn, but they were really, really good. The gunship, the sniper's nest, the attack helicopter, they're all really powerful. I do wish there was a few more. I think they could have gotten like a swarm in the game or something like that. I think that would have expanded my enjoyment of this game a little bit more. But I like powerful score streaks, and the score streaks in this game are very, very powerful. Therefore, I really, really do appreciate them. So let's start to get into the bad stuff. Now, I want to start off with specialists, because I don't necessarily think specialists are a terrible thing. There's good and there's bad things about them. So, of course, the bad thing about them is the fact that they can be really annoying, right? If you get killed by a specialist, especially a very lethal one, they're annoying. I think specialists as an idea aren't bad. I think they work better if they're passive. Like, for example, Recon, Crash, Torque, those characters who have more passive abilities I think work a lot better in the game. But when you have something like a War Machine or Tempest's like gun, it just becomes frustrating dying by those. There is, of course, a game mode, 2 different game modes I believe, that don't have specialists in them. So if you really hated them that much, you could have played these game modes. I personally played them a lot during its life cycle, but there's less people playing the game now, so it usually takes a little bit longer to find those lobbies, but you can still find them. And if you really hated them so much, that's a pretty damn good mode for you to go ahead and play. I mean, you get rid of that issue of being killed over and over again by specialists when you play the mode. They do also take away the different operator mods and a couple different other systems that the game has, like those gadgets, which were an interesting system in the created class. So if you wanted to play the class in a more bare bones classic style, they have a mode for you, which kind of removes the big complaint that people have with this game. But of course, they still are a part of the main mode, and I do see the problems with it. But at the same time, they're pretty cool. They have cool personalities. All the characters are really interesting and unique. They had a couple of the Black Ops 3 ones returning, as well as some new ones. And some of their abilities are really fun to use. Some of their weapons are really fun to use. So personally, I'm not massively against specialists. I would just not like to see them again in COD. But for this game, I don't think they're a massive negative. They're a minor negative, though, for sure. I think it's definitely a problem this game had. Another thing, the graphics in this game, like I said, for Blackout, they weren't terrible in multiplayer. There's a couple aspects, like, for example, the maps. The maps themselves look really, really good, but there's a lot of times, especially in the loading screens, where the textures don't really load in right away, and it looks really bad. And I think that's just lack of, optimization this game has, I guess, to make that happen in the first place. It's not a big deal. Like I said, graphics to me aren't a big problem, but it is kind of annoying sometimes when you're trying to play a next generation game, which came out in 2018, and it looks like it came out in like 2014 maybe, you know what I mean? It should look a little bit more crispy, but there are some places that look really nice. Are a lot of locations on the different maps that look really, really nice, but a lot of the character designs, especially when you're up close, can look a little pixelated and sometimes a little too cartoony for my taste, but it's not a big deal. The microtransactions, let's get into those, because they were bad for like half of the life cycle, right? From June to November. When they first came out with the different microtransactions, they really weren't that bad. You had the Battle Pass, which was free for everyone, so it really wasn't that big of a deal. I thought it was a fine system, and you can earn them tiers, and you can get the guns for free. I was happy with that. They still had supply drops in the game, but they were pretty much cosmetic only, so I had absolutely no problem. But once June came around, they stopped putting the guns in the Battle Pass, and they said, all right, now we're putting the guns in supply drops, and we'll have these little like things you can earn in the Battle Pass, which give you a free gun, but you're not going to be able to get all of them because we're adding more guns than what we're putting in the Battle Pass. So that became really annoying, and the system was pretty bad for a couple months, and I was really pissed about it. A lot of people were. But then comes November when Modern Warfare comes out and they fixed it. Now the game is like perfect. Like the microtransaction system right now, there's no issue I have with it. I literally got every gun myself just by playing the game and using my reserves. That's a great system, and it's perfect right now. You can even buy some of the other skins with reserves that you earn for free in the game just by playing. It's a great system. It was unfortunate that like 6 months or so, or a little bit less than 6 months, it had a really bad system. Actually, no, it's like 3 months, actually. It wasn't as long as I'm making it seem like, but was still an issue that needs to be addressed with this game. It definitely could have been a better system, but honestly, as it is right now, I think I like the system more than Modern Warfare's system, because you can actually earn items for free right now than compared to Modern Warfare, which you know, that's one big issue. Another issue I had was the Black Ops Pass. I was not against season passes. I'm glad they stopped doing them, but I was pissed that they forced you to buy it without buying them separately. So like you couldn't buy the separate zombie maps, you had to buy them all in the one pass. That's a bad DLC model right there. Not good. You're gonna lose a lot of sales when you do that. I think they would have benefited from just making the different zombie maps separate purchases. Multiplayer maps probably should have been free, but like you know, obviously we're getting the free DLC now in Modern Warfare, but they're also not giving us as many new maps because of it. So I don't know if that's like a problem. We definitely had more new maps in Black Ops 4 than we have in Modern Warfare, even at this point in the life cycle. I also really hated the private matches in this game. This is a small complaint, but you know, me and my friends like to play these cool custom modes in private matches. They didn't give you many options in the private matches in this game, not nearly as much as you had in Black Ops 3, which was really unfortunate and kind of sucked in my opinion. I love the guns in this game though, I'll be honest. A lot of the guns feel very unique from one another. There's a lot of fun guns to use, a lot of unique ones. Like you have a freaking mini death machine that is in like a SMG form. Like guns like that are really unique and fun to use. You don't really get that same thing in like the past era or modern era games. The futuristic era allows you to do more crazy shit like that, and I'm glad that this game had that. The map locations are fantastic. We have some of the coolest map locations ever, especially in the DLC maps. You have a one that takes place in a zombie museum. You have the one that takes place in the little town under Dreisendrach. Like, cool. That's really awesome to have, honestly. And there's even one in like super villain lair. Like, they're just so crazy and outlandish. But that's what honestly DLC and COD should be, in my opinion. I don't want to take this game seriously. It's a video game. You know, I'm not trying to take these games seriously. I'm trying to just have fun with them. And when they make the locations all really boring, it kind of loosens a lot of the fun that these games could very well have. But I'm glad this game didn't really care too much. Went crazy with it. Had some crazy skins, which are all pretty damn cool. And all in all, I really do enjoy multiplayer in this game. I think the gameplay is some of the best gameplay we've ever had in a Call of Duty title, and that's thanks to the time to kill and the manual healing, in my honest opinion. I wouldn't mind seeing this type of gameplay again, but I know the community wouldn't like that, so I'm just going to go out here and say probably shouldn't have a game like this again, even if I really did enjoy it a lot. I'm going to give it a 26 out of 34, which is pretty damn high. That's a 76%, which is pretty much the same score as what I gave Blackout. Like I said, both great modes that I think could have been a little bit better if some of those issues were fixed. I think the good stuff is so good, but the bad stuff is also so bad. And I think that bad stuff was mainly because of the lack of development time that this game had. So we are now on to Call of Duty Black Ops 4 Zombies, and my god, this is easily the most divisive portion of this game, the most controversial. There's a lot of people who absolutely love BO4 Zombies, and a lot of people who absolutely hate it and dread its existence, and then there's some people who are pretty indifferent on it, and I'm one of those people. I really did enjoy it as a whole, definitely liked it more than I didn't, but there's also a lot of problems with it that definitely drag it down and make the maps not as good as they would be on other games. Now, one thing that this game really did, it was easily the most ambitious Zombies to date. They changed a lot of core mechanics, which was pretty ballsy of them to do. They also went with a completely brand new storyline. I think they were really just doing this because they realized how good of a success BO3 was. They were like, okay, these fans love a lot of the stuff we put out. They're probably gonna love it even if we try to change it and do it our own way, but unfortunately the changes didn't really go down that well, and a lot of people dreaded it, and obviously the game was hurt in its post-launch content because of, you know, Treyarch being pushed onto the next game so early. There was a lot more modes, maps planned, which never came out because of that. But we still got a lot to this game, and we still have so much to talk about in terms of zombies because there's a lot of content within BO4 Zombies. Easily the most content-heavy zombies mode to date. People try to deny it, but it does. It has 8 maps with 3 modes on each, custom mutations, all sorts of operator mods and camos that you can put in your guns, not nearly as many that you can put in other COD games, a lot of specialist weapons, the most amount of wonder weapons, like 20 perks. There is so much content in BO4 Zombies. Now, not all the content's great, but a lot of it is still there. There's so much stuff to do within this game. The Rush and Gauntlet modes could have been a lot better, but they were still fun to play when you were not trying to play the main modes. Maybe you were just bored of the main modes and you wanted to play some other mode. They were still there to play. I think they could have been a lot better if they made different updates to them, changed around some of the mechanics in some of those modes, but they're still really fun to do. Operator mods, I said that as a positive in multiplayer. It's also a positive in zombies because the operator mods change around how the guns work in zombies as well, which makes it rewarding to actually level up your guns all the way. It makes it worth it. I mean, if you get the operator mod for the Spitfire, holy shit, this thing becomes insane. You can get the operator mod for the Hades as well, and it makes it way better. They're worth going for. They're worth grinding the game for. There's a lot of things to grind for in this game. Dark matter has its own thing in zombies. It's not like BO3 where you just get the dark matter for multiplayer. No, you got to actually get it yourself in BO4, and it's a grind and a half. I personally never went for it, but it's still there. Custom mutations are awesome, but they're done not that well. I think they're awesome that they're there, right? I like the option. I do like the option to be able to change around settings and such, but not being able to do Easter eggs in them is what really brings them down. I think if you can do Easter eggs in them, the community would absolutely eat that shit up. They would do all sorts of Easter egg challenges because Easter eggs, let's be real here, are one of the best things about zombies, especially the current day zombies. So if we were able to do the Easter eggs in these modes after completing them once, custom mutations would be way more replayable. Unfortunately, it's not as replayable. I do wish they did more with it, but it's still nice to have it there. It's obviously going to be a positive if it's just there at least. You know, I'm not going to say it's a bad thing that it wasn't perfect. It's at least it has it, you know what I mean? All the maps have great atmospheres and soundtracks. That's one thing BO4 hits on the head, man, is the atmospheres. All the maps feel very different from one another. You have Alcatraz, you have ancient Greece, you have a haunted mansion, you have the Titanic, you have a Roman Colosseum, you have a Siberian outpost, you have the Pentagon. There's just so many great places to go with, and they really fit the atmospheres nicely with great soundtracks done by Brian Tooney as well as the other members of the Treyarch sound design team, and then of course the amazing Easter egg songs by Kevin Sherwood, which, to be fair, Black Ops 3 also had some great atmospheres and soundtracks, but I'm not gonna lie, I think Black Ops 4 might even be a little bit higher in that department. Maps like 9, Ancient Evil, and Alpha Omega I think are the best portions of this game. Blood of the Dead and Voyage and such aren't as good, but honestly, I don't think any map in this game is necessarily bad. I think there's definitely ones that are not nearly as good, but I wouldn't consider any of these 8 maps to be trash, bottom of the barrel, even though many people will say that, which, you know, they can say what they want, but I do think the biggest issue with this game is a lot of missed opportunities, because I am saying a lot of these cool things that this game has, but of course they could have been so much better. I think the split up in the storylines kind of was a little bit confusing for many different fans. I was okay with it, but I do think it kind of hurt the Ether story a bit because they had to finish it up in 4 maps rather than having a few more maps to do it with. Obviously, I believe they do have different plans, but, you know, development issues kind of faulted that a little bit. The perk system, I didn't hate it, right? I hated it at launch, but I got over it and I accepted it, and I realized it's really not that bad of a system. I think it's much better for Chaos, but when it comes to the Ether story, you really lose that perk personality that the perks had back in BO3 and every other map before that. You don't have that personality. The jingles are gone. The perk machines themselves are gone. All they are just things you put on in your created class before the game, and you go into the map. Having only 4 perks on the map at once is also a bit unfortunate. I just wish they didn't go with this perk system. I appreciate them removing the crutch perks though. I honestly think Jug should be implemented in another way. I'm glad Double Tap was implemented in another way, Speed Cola in another way, because otherwise I'd be getting those same perks every damn game. At least in this game there's variety. There's so many perks. You got Time Slip, Stone Cold Stronghold, Winter's Wail, all the DLC perks, which were not that useful, but really freaking fun to mess around with. There's a lot of stuff in this game to mess around with, like the different specialist weapons. Only a few aren't really good, but like there's still a lot more you can still mess around with at least. The point system was a little unfortunate in my opinion. I really think it was a bad change to go with, because it really made a lot of different guns in the game useless. Like, there's no point of using point guns anymore. Point guns don't even exist anymore in this game. You might as well just use a shotgun or the wonder weapons, and you'll get the same amount of points anyways. The HUD sucks. That's straight up honest. The HUD is disgusting. It's ugly. It's gross. I wish they went with a different HUD. There's many different options they could have gone with, but whatever. It is what it is, right? I do think some of the most positive things about this game are the Easter eggs and the story. I was very invested in the story, even the Chaos story. The Chaos story, especially in Ancient Evil, was fantastic. Ether was fine as well, honestly. TOG has some of the best lore elements to any Zombies map ever, how it like wraps everything up. I actually liked the ending to the storyline. I know many didn't. I think it was great. Now, in terms of gameplay, I didn't like it. I didn't like how the Easter egg was, and how it didn't have some cool boss fight, but in terms of story, it was beautifully written and actually made me a little teary-eyed watching it, which is what these maps should be doing to people. So I appreciated that. The Easter eggs themselves for the better maps in the game, like 9, Ancient Evil, Alpha, Omega, I thought those Easter eggs were all solid. Not a big fan of Voyage or Blood of the Dead's Easter egg, but honestly, the other maps are good enough to the point where I don't even mind that. Dead of the Night as well has a fine Easter egg quest. The wonder weapons in this game, like I said, are really fun. You have the gauntlets on Ancient Evil, Alistair's Folly, you have the Ray Gun Mark II variants, you have the Scorpion Gun on 9, you have the Kraken on Voyage. A lot of unique different wonder weapons that you can mess around with that are not that hard to earn. What BO4 decided to do was put them in the box and in a side quest for the majority of them. So what this does is it allows the casual players to just earn them without even looking up a guide or trying to figure out how to get them themselves. No, they can just get them straight out of the box. But for us more hardcore fans who don't want to worry about RNG, now we can just go do a quest and get them right away, and it's much, much better that way. I hate having like Garad Krovi where it's only out of the box, or Izetsubo no Shima where you only have to build it. I like having options, and when you have both the options there, it helps out the casual fan base and the hardcore fan base all in one. So honestly, BO4 Zombies, although it wasn't the best mode out there, definitely not the best Zombies experience, but I do think it did a lot of good things for the franchise because they experimented. I appreciate them trying some new things so they can see what the fans like and what they don't like. If they just went with a carbon copy of Black Ops 3, it probably would have went over a little bit better, but we wouldn't have experimented and seen what different things they can do. And there's a lot of things that they did in this game that was different that could actually work very well for the future, like removing the crutch perks. It also kind of warms us up to the idea of removing those crutch perks since it sounded such like an outlandish idea. Well, they did it, and honestly, the game works fine. It's not like the gameplay's ruined because of it. It just ruins some of that personality to it that Juggernog had and a couple other machines had, but honestly, at the end of the day, it works to me. So Zombies in Black Ops 4, I'm going to give it 27 out of 33. I think it's a solid Zombies experience. It's not the best one though, and I think some of those mechanical issues kind of bring it down a little bit, but I think the map atmospheres themselves and how replayable this game is because of all the content in it and the level up system, how the elixirs work, there's a lot of them in there, there's a lot of things you can mess around with, like the specialists and the creative class system they have in this game. So much shit to do to the point where I actually have a fun time going back and playing this game often. I do play it pretty often, I gotta say. There's a lot more quality of life complaints I can make, like a couple little features that I'm not a big fan of, like the quotes or the subtitles being really big on your screen, but that's such a nitpick, I didn't even bother to bring it up, but it is something. There are a lot more I could have said in this video, but a lot of them are nitpicks. This game has a lot of those nitpicky type things, if you know what I'm talking about. So, like I said, Zombies, fine. So let's get into the final verdict. So as I said many times, Black Ops 4 is one of those games where it could have been so much better if they had the proper development time put into it. Maybe if they weren't thrown onto the next title so quickly, we could have gotten a lot more content and the content could have been way more polished. But as I said, there's a lot of great stuff about this game that kind of overtakes a lot of that bad stuff that I mentioned. So this game is very good, but also very bad at the same exact time, which to me is what makes it a good game, because it's definitely more good than bad for sure. That's why I support this game. That's why I've always supported it. I do think that going forward, that Treyarch needs to kind of prioritize taking their time on these projects. Obviously, Activision could be holding them back for many different situations, but they need to make sure it's polished because this game was released in a state with a lot of bugs, glitches, blue screen issues, just a lot of bad optimization problems. But as a whole, as I said, the content itself is full of great ideas that creates great gameplay elements, for the most part, obviously. A lot of great maps, a lot of great guns, a lot of great mechanics in all sorts of different modes that creates this overall fun and enjoyable Call of Duty experience. If you're a campaign-only person, like I said, you're probably not going to like this game. But as me being a big multiplayer and Zombies fan, this game was what I wanted. So for the final verdict, I'm giving this game 78 out of 100, which adding them all up obviously is what gave me that. And that number perfectly describes this game because it just feels like such a C-ranged game within the 70s, you know what I mean? It's not quite in the 80s or the 90s where it's like what Black Ops 2 and Black Ops 3 would be, but it's not quite below the 70s like where some of the shittier ones would be. But 78 seems like a perfect number, and it just works so damn well. So hopefully you all enjoyed this retrospective review for Call of Duty Black Ops 4. Up next is Modern Warfare, but we're not going to do that for a long time. I want to wait till after the DLC content comes out for that game, which could be months from now. We have no idea when they're going to be done updating it, but we'll wait for that one. We're not in any rush to do it, but I did want to get out this one because Black Ops 4 is obviously done with their DLC cycle. They're not releasing anything new for this game anytime soon, probably never again. So I'm really excited for the next COD that Treyarch brings out. There's a lot of fishy things going on with behind the scenes, it sounds like, because of leaks and such, but hopefully it turns out the way we all want it to be. I'm really excited. I can't wait for some more zombies and some more Treyarch multiplayer goodness, and even the campaign will be pretty great, I'm sure. And whatever they do with Warzone, I'm excited. So hopefully you all enjoyed. I'll see you on my next one. Peace out.